HOA ordered me to open my gate. I responded by taking over the only road. They came with a letter in their hand. They said I must open my gate. Their smile looked sweet, but it felt like a trap. Every word was a warning, every glance a threat. I could feel the whole neighborhood watching, waiting for me to bow down. But I don't bow. I build plans in silence, plans they will never see coming. And when the sun rises, their tires will roll over something they never thought I could own. Welcome to HOA Secrets Uncovered. I'm Daniel. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac that hides loud secrets. By day, I'm a simple handyman, fixing fences and mowing lawns. But when the HOA crossed my line, I became something else. This is the story of how their demand to open my gate turned into the day I took over the only road they all depend on. They told me to open my gate. They said it like a command, like I lived in their house, like my front yard was their hallway. I stood on my porch and watched the street breathe. It was early. The sun was soft. The air smelled like cut grass and wet hose water. Dogs were quiet. Sprinklers clicked in slow rhythm. Everything looked calm. But inside me, a storm began to whisper. I am Daniel. I live at the bend of a small cul-de-sac, the kind of place where lawns look like rugs and smiles look like masks. People wave with fingers only. People whisper with eyes. People obey the book in the binder with the gold letters on the cover. Homeowners Association rules. I am a handyman by day. I fix the things people break, gates that sag, sprinklers that cough, windows that stick after summer rain. I am good with tools. I am patient with nails. I am careful with wood. But patience with people is different. People want more than a gate to open. They want you to bow when they pass. The letter came the night before, white paper. No mention of safety, only the look, only the image. Neighbors started to watch me when I walked my dog at night, not with words, with curtains, with the quick twitch of blinds, with the pause of a garage door that stops halfway down, then stares, then closes the rest of the way slow, like a mouth thinking about a word. I kept working. I fixed Mr. Patel's porch light. I replaced Mrs. Lang's mailbox post. I re-leveled the stepping stones by the corner house. I said hello to everyone. They said hello back. Their hellos were thin. Their eyes went to my gate. Every time, like a magnet, they could not fight. One afternoon, I saw a small group on the sidewalk by the big oak. The president, the vice president, the neighbor who jogs without sweating. They had the binder open. They pointed toward my yard. They nodded together. They looked like crows picking a line of seed. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter. I ran my finger along every sentence. I read the part about fines. I read the part about hearings. I read the part about liens, big words for a small street, big threats for a wood gate. I turned off the main light and kept the little lamp on. The house felt quiet like a church after everyone leaves. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the soft tap of the dog's breathing, the clock on the stove. I let the quiet talk to me. Sometimes quiet says things words do not. I thought about rules, how they hold shape when they are fair, how they rot when they are used like a stick. I thought about the smile that did not reach the eyes. I thought about the binder like a crown. I thought about the street itself, the curve, the entrance, the way every car has to pass one place to get in or out, the way the road is the throat of the neighborhood. I walked outside and stood on my porch. The moon was thin. The road looked silver. I followed it with my eyes from the entrance to the B. And by my fence, I thought about ownership. Who owns the grass? Who owns the sidewalk? Who owns the strip between the sidewalk and the curb? Who owns the road? Most people never ask. They think the city owns it. They think the HOA owns it. They think ownership is a cloud that covers everything the same. But I fix broken things. I read the labels on the screws. I know that nothing is a cloud. Everything is a bolt that someone had to pay for. I went back inside. I opened my laptop. I searched property records, parcel maps, maintenance agreements, old minutes from old meetings, names of developers who built the first row of houses, buried links that fewer people click. I clicked them. The dog lifted his head, then went back to sleep. The clock on the stove kept its slow steps. I found a note inside an old document, the kind of note people forget to lock behind a password. It was small, but it glowed. Private road maintained by, then a company name that no longer exists, then a transfer right, then an option to sell to adjacent owner with easement terms. Dry words. But my hands warmed as I read them, because dry words can carry wet power. I traced the line on the parcel map with my finger, from the entrance sign to the bend by my fence. The road was not city. It was a thing from the past that slipped between papers. It had fallen out of a pocket and nobody noticed. Not the president, not the vice president, not the neighbor who jogs without sweating. They were busy counting mailbox heights. They were busy measuring grass blades. They never looked at the bones under their shoes. I printed the page. I placed it under the letter with the red stamp. One paper wanted my gate open. One paper opened something else. A door in the floor of the street. I slept hard that night when I dreamed. I was walking down the center line of the road, white paint under my feet, houses on both sides like quiet ships, the gate behind me, the entrance ahead. In the dream, I bent down and touched the paint. It felt like wood. Morning came with the thump of a newspaper on concrete. I brewed coffee. I stood at the window. The president jogged by with perfect form. She glanced at my gate. Her smile did its work. Her eyes did their duty. She did not know what I knew now. The quiet thrill of knowledge moved through me slow, like the first deep breath after a storm. I spent the day working. I sanded a door for a client 2 streets over. I replaced a broken latch. I whistled while I worked. The letter with the red stamp waited at home, but it no longer pressed on my chest. It sat flat, like a page in a book I had already read. When I came back, there was a new note at my door. Reminder, hearing scheduled, attendance required. The paper smelled like a new binder. I held it to the light. The edges glowed. I felt a steady calm rise in me, a calm made of screws and plans and property lines. I walked to the fence and ran my hand over the wood. I felt the grain and the knots. I felt the truth of things built by hand. Then I looked down the street. Cars glided in, cars glided out. Same path every time. Wheels tracing a habit. Wheels trusting a road they did not question. I thought about fairness. I thought about kindness. I thought about how power should feel like shade, not like a fist. I do not like fights, but I do not like being pushed either. If they wanted a show of control, they were about to see a truer one. Not loud, not messy, just a quiet lever pulled at the right joint. That evening the sky turned orange. Kids drew hopscotch lines with chalk. A father taught his son how to ride a bike without training wheels. The boy wobbled, then found balance. He laughed. I smiled. Balance, that was the word I wanted back on this street. I went inside and gathered the pages I had printed. I placed them in a plain folder, no gold letters, no crown, just paper and truth. I set the folder on the table. I rested my palm on it. It felt warm from the sun coming through the window. I breathed in. I breathed out. I knew the next steps. They would not see them coming, because they never imagined someone like me reading what they never read. Night came easy. Crickets started their slow song. The dog curled at my feet. I turned off the lamp. The house sighed. I looked through the window one last time. The road lay still like a sleeping animal, waiting to wake in my name. The letter with the red stamp sat heavy on my table. The folder with the map sat beside it. 2 worlds pressed together. One told me to obey. The other whispered that the ground beneath their feet could belong to me. The next morning came too bright, the kind of light that makes you squint before you even open the door. I walked outside with my coffee. Neighbors were already out. Joggers with perfect shoes, mothers pulling wagons, a man trimming a hedge that was already straight. Their eyes cut to my gate again. Same look as always. But this time, I felt different, because I carried a secret they could not see. The president came walking down the street, her clipboard hugged tight to her chest, her hair pulled sharp back like every strand was under rule. She waved with the kind of wave that feels more like a warning light than a hello. "Morning, Daniel," she said. Her voice was sugar, but the tone was steel. I nodded and sipped. She glanced at the gate. Of course she did. Then she glanced at the road and kept walking. She never knew the ground under her step was already shifting. The day moved slow. I fixed a gutter for a man 2 houses over. I painted a trim that had chipped after rain. I smiled at people who did not smile back. But every job I did, every nail I drove, I thought about leverage. Because life is not about rules written in binders. It is about who holds the tool at the right time. By the afternoon, I drove to the county office. The air inside smelled like paper dust and old air conditioning. I walked past rows of chairs. A tired clerk sat behind thick glass. I asked for property filings. She slid me a stack that looked boring to anyone else, but to me it looked alive. I turned the pages slow. Every stamp, every name, every date, all proof that the road was not theirs. It was, in a strange, forgotten way, waiting for someone to claim it. The clerk barely looked at me when I asked what it would take. Her words were flat. Just paperwork. And a fee. She could have been talking about a fishing license. But I felt a pulse in my chest, because what she called a fee, I called freedom. I signed where she pointed. My name spread across the page in blue ink. It looked small against all the legal words. But small things matter when placed in the right crack. A seed in concrete can move a sidewalk. A signature can move a neighborhood. When I walked out, the sun was lower. The street outside the office felt ordinary. Cars honked. People rushed. But to me, the air felt different. I was holding a silent weapon in my hand, folded papers, unseen power. That night I could not sleep. I sat by the window with the lamp off. I watched the quiet road outside my house. Every car that rolled past made me grin inside. They thought it was their road. They thought it was the HOA's road. But no, it was mine. Every tire mark, every crack in the asphalt, every shadow, mine. The next day was Saturday. The HOA held their meeting at the clubhouse, the kind of meeting where ice sit untouched and water jugs sweat on plastic tables. The president stood tall in front, the binder open like scripture. Her voice carried rules like sermons, fines announced, warnings handed out. She looked at me more than once, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to show fear. But I sat calm because I held something thicker than their binder, a deed. When she announced the hearing for my gate, people nodded. A few smirked. A few whispered. The president leaned back like she had already won. I almost laughed, but I held it, because silence is sharper than shouting. When the meeting ended, I walked out last. The president caught up with me. She tapped her clipboard on her arm. "Daniel, we'll settle this at the hearing," she said. Her eyes were dry glass again. But for the first time, I did not feel smaller under them. I felt taller because she was walking on a road she no longer owned. I went home. I opened my gate myself. I let it swing wide, then shut it again. Not because she said so, not because of the letter, but because it was mine to open and mine to close. Choice. That was the real power. As the sun sank, I hammered a post at the corner near the entrance. On it I nailed a small sign, white background, black letters, private road, access, by permission only. The wood shook as I drove the nails deep. Every strike echoed through me like a drum. When the neighbors saw it, they froze, mouths parted, eyes narrowed. They whispered again. But this time, not about me. This time about the sign, about the road, about the truth they had ignored for years. The president came storming down the street not long after. Her shoes clicked like a judge's gavel. She pointed at the sign. Her words came sharp. "You can't do this, Daniel." But her voice cracked just enough to betray her. I pulled the folded papers from my pocket. I held them out without a word. She snatched them. Her eyes ran across the page fast, then slower still. Her face drained color like paint washed by rain. She looked at me, the smile gone, the eyes no longer glass. They were empty now, because for once she had no rule to lean on, no section to quote, no fine to threaten. I turned my back and walked to my porch. The road stretched behind me like a leash I now held in my hand. The gate closed with a heavy thud. The dog barked once, then quieted. The air felt different, like a stage after the final act when the lights fade. But I knew this was not the end. This was just the moment the curtain dropped for them, and lifted for me. The letter with the red stamp sat heavy on my table. The folder with the map sat beside it. Two worlds pressed together. One told me to obey. The other whispered that the ground beneath their feet could belong to me. The next morning came too bright. The kind of light that makes you squint before you even open the door. I walked outside with my coffee. Neighbors were already out, joggers with perfect shoes, mothers pulling wagons, a man trimming a hedge that was already straight, their eyes cut to my gate again. Same look as always, but this time I felt different, because I carried a secret they could not see. The president came walking down the street, her clipboard hugged tight to her chest. Her hair pulled sharp back like every strand was under rule. She waved with the kind of wave that feels more like a warning light than a hello. "Morning, Daniel," she said. Her voice was sugar, but the tone was steel. I nodded and sipped. She glanced at the gate. Of course she did. Then she glanced at the road, and kept walking. She never knew the ground under her step was already shifting. The day moved slow. I fixed a gutter for a man 2 houses over. I painted a trim that had chipped after rain. I smiled at people who did not smile back. But every job I did, every nail I drove, I thought about leverage. Because life is not about rules written in binders. It is about who holds the tool at the right time. By the afternoon, I drove to the county office. The air inside smelled like paper dust and old air conditioning. I walked past rows of chairs. A tired clerk sat behind thick glass. I asked for property filings. She slid me a stack that looked boring to anyone else. But to me it looked alive. I turned the pages slow. Every stamp, every name, every date. All proof that the road was not theirs. It was, in a strange, forgotten way, waiting for someone to claim it. The clerk barely looked at me when I asked what it would take. Her words were flat. Just paperwork. And a fee. She could have been talking about a fishing license, but I felt a pulse in my chest, because what she called a fee, I called freedom. I signed where she pointed. My name spread across the page in blue ink. It looked small against all the legal words, but small things matter when placed in the right crack. A seed in concrete can move a sidewalk. A signature can move a neighborhood. When I walked out, the sun was lower. The street outside the office felt ordinary. Cars honked, people rushed. But to me the air felt different. I was holding a silent weapon in my hand. Folded papers, unseen power. That night I could not sleep. I sat by the window with the lamp off. I watched the quiet road outside my house. Every car that rolled past made me grin inside. They thought it was their road. They thought it was the HOA's road. But no, it was mine. Every tire mark, every crack in the asphalt, every shadow. Mine. The next day was Saturday. The HOA held their meeting at the clubhouse. The kind of meeting where cookies sit untouched and water jugs sweat on plastic tables. The president stood tall in front, the binder open like scripture. Her voice carried rules like sermons. Fines announced, warnings handed out. She looked at me more than once, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to show fear. But I sat calm, because I held something thicker than their binder, a deed. When she announced the hearing for my gate, people nodded, a few smirked, a few whispered. The president leaned back like she had already won. I almost laughed, but I held it, because silence is sharper than shouting. When the meeting ended, I walked out last. The president caught up with me. She tapped her clipboard on her arm. "Daniel, we'll settle this at the hearing," she said. Her eyes were dry glass again, but for the first time, I did not feel smaller under them. I felt taller, because she was walking on a road she no longer owned. I went home. I opened my gate myself. I let it swing wide, then shut it again. Not because she said so, not because of the letter, but because it was mine to open and mine to close. Choice. That was the real power. As the sun sank, I hammered a post at the corner near the entrance. On it, I nailed a small sign. White background, black letters, private road. access by permission only. The wood shook as I drove the nails deep. Every strike echoed through me like a drum. When the neighbors saw it, they froze. Mouths parted, eyes narrowed. They whispered again. But this time, not about me. This time about the sign, about the road, about the truth they had ignored for years. The president came storming down the street not long after. Her shoes clicked like a judge's gavel. She pointed at the sign. Her words came sharp. "You can't do this, Daniel." But her voice cracked just enough to betray her. I pulled the folded papers from my pocket. I held them out with, "Out a word." She snatched them. Her eyes ran across the page fast, then slower still. Her face drained color like paint washed by rain. She looked at me, the smile gone, the eyes no longer glass. They were empty now, because for once she had no rule to lean on, no section to quote, no fine to threaten. I turned my back and walked to my porch. The road stretched behind me like a leash I now held in my hand. The gate closed with a heavy thud. The dog barked once, then quieted. The air felt different, like a stage after the final act when the lights fade. But I knew this was not the end. This was just the moment the curtain dropped for them and lifted for me. So tell me this. If your whole neighborhood tried to break you with rules, and one day you found the one hidden card in your hand, would you play it quietly like I did? Or would you slam it on the table for everyone to see? You said. Now start with the part 3, 1,000, making it even interesting with a hook, and end it with an engaging question as well. Words. ChatGPT said. The sign stood at the entrance like a new moon in the daylight, white and bold. Private road, access by permission only. The letters caught the morning sun and threw it back at every windshield that passed. Cars slowed when they saw it. Brakes whispered. Neighbors leaned forward in their seats. Some rolled down windows. Some just stared through glass. The quiet of our perfect street shifted, like someone had knocked on the bones of the neighborhood and they were listening now. I stood at my porch with coffee in hand, the dog at my feet. The breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut grass from 3 houses down, but today it felt different, not peaceful, not hostile, just charged, like the air before a storm that no one can see yet. Mrs. Lang was the first to approach, her steps quick, her lips already tight. She pointed at the sign like it was a rattlesnake. "Daniel, what is this?" Her voice was half whisper, half shout. I sipped my coffee slow. "Just a sign," I said. Her eyes darted to the gate behind me, then back to the sign. She wanted more words. I gave her none. She turned away with a small sound in her throat, a sound of someone who just learned the rules were not what she thought. By noon, the whispers turned into a low hum across the street. Curtains fluttered, phones glowed behind blinds. I knew messages were flying from one house to another, but no one knocked on my door, not yet. Around 2, the HOA vice president came jogging down the road. He was the neighbor who never seemed to sweat. Even today, the sun high and hard, his shirt dry, his breath easy. He stopped at the sign. He read the letters twice. Then he looked at me. No smile, no wave, just a long stare. "Is this legal?" he asked. I held up the folded papers like a card trick. "It is now." His jaw worked like he wanted to chew on a word, but no word came. He nodded once, then jogged away, still not sweating. The president was next. I heard her shoes before I saw her. Sharp clicks like a metronome of anger. She walked fast, clipboard hugged tight. Her eyes found mine and held. "No glass today," they burned. "Daniel, we need to talk." Her voice was sugar over fire. I stayed on the porch. "What about?" "You know what about." Her eyes flicked to the sign, then back. "You can't just put that there." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't just put it there." I handed her the papers, the same ones I had shown the vice president. She snatched them like she was grabbing a branch in a flood. Her eyes raced across the lines, names, dates, the transfer of ownership. She read faster, then slower, her lips pressed thin. When she finished, she held the papers like, They might burn her fingers. This is a misunderstanding, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. It trembled just enough for me to hear. No, I said, it's a deed. The words hung between us. She looked at the road under her shoes. For the first time she seemed small, not a president, not a ruler, just a woman standing on something she no longer controlled. Behind her, 2 neighbors stood at the curb, watching, waiting. Their faces open like children hearing their first thunder. The president noticed them and straightened. She tried to pull the steel back into her spine. "We will review this," she said, her tone sharp again. But I saw the crack in it, like paint peeling in slow motion. She turned and walked away. Her shoes clicked faster now. "Not metronome, escape," the 2 neighbors whispered to each other as she passed. Then both looked at me, not with anger, not with fear. Something else, something close to curiosity. Then they too walked away. The rest of the afternoon felt like a new season. Birds sang the same, wind moved the same, but the street carried a different sound, a low, restless energy, as if every mailbox and every hedge knew the ground had shifted. I sat on the porch until the sun began to drop. The dog slept at my feet. I watched cars enter and leave. Each driver slowed at the sign. Some shook their heads, some smiled. One man raised his phone and took a picture. The sign caught the last light like a lantern. When the street lamps blinked on, a black SUV rolled in slow. Not a neighbor's car. Dark windows, unmarked. It stopped right by the sign. The engine idled. I felt the hair on my neck lift. The driver's window lowered. A man in a suit leaned out. He looked at the sign, then at me, his face unreadable. He gave a small nod. Then the window slid up. The SUV rolled away without a sound. I stood there longer than I planned. The night air grew cooler. Crickets started their slow song. The dog lifted his head and gave a low rumble. I rubbed his ears. "It's okay, boy," I whispered. But inside I was not sure. The next morning a new letter lay on my mat. Not the usual white paper. This one heavy cream, gold embossed seal at the top. No red warning stamp. Just a short line. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Attendance required." I held it in my hand, the paper thick, the seal cold. It felt less like a request, more like a summons. I looked out at the road, at the sign standing still. "Private road, access by permission only." The letters gleamed in the early light. A quiet challenge. I poured coffee and sat by the window. I thought about the black SUV, the man in the suit, the nod that meant something I could not name. And I wondered what kind of storm the HOA was planning behind their clubhouse doors. Because when people who live by rules start to lose control, they do not fade quietly, they fight. The gold seal on the letter caught the first light of morning. It shone like a coin left on a grave. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Attendance required." No other words. No hint of what they planned. Only the weight of a command. I turned the paper over in my hands. The back was blank, but it felt heavy, like it carried more than ink, like it carried all the whispers of every neighbor who had peeked through blinds since the sign went up. The dog pressed his nose against my leg. He felt the tension. Animals always do. I scratched behind his ears and stared at the road. The sign stood silent at the entrance. "Private road. Access by permission only." The black letters caught the wind and did not flinch. All morning the neighborhood moved differently, slower, quieter. People who used to wave barely lifted a hand. Sprinklers turned without rhythm. Then the kids on bikes rode in silence. They felt it too, the change in the air, the storm gathering in the clubhouse. I spent the day working with my hands, a fence to repair, a porch to re-level. Wood and nails steadied me. But every time my hammer hit, I heard another sound in my head. Not metal on wood, but the echo of shoes clicking on tile. The sound of the president walking into the meeting tonight, clipboard ready, eyes hard. As evening fell, I washed the sawdust from my arms and put on a clean shirt. I didn't dress to impress. I dressed to be noticed without trying. Neutral, calm, the kind of calm that makes people wonder what you know that they don't. The clubhouse sat at the far end of the cul-de-sac. Its windows glowed yellow in the twilight. Cars lined the curb. People gathered near the door, their voices low and tight. No laughter, no small talk, only a murmur like bees behind glass. When I stepped inside, every head turned. The room smelled of paper and tension. Folding chairs formed a circle. The president stood at the center like a conductor who had lost her baton. Her eyes met mine, glass again, but now cracked. She raised her clipboard and cleared her throat. "Thank you for coming on short notice," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. But I heard the strain. "We are here to discuss a matter that affects the entire neighborhood." A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted in their seat. The president went on. "As you may have seen, a sign has been posted at the entrance to our community." She paused. Her eyes flicked to me. "As you may also know, it claims the road is private, and access requires permission." More whispers. A few gasps. One man said, "Is it true?" Another woman shook her head as if she could shake the words away. The president lifted a paper. "We believe this is a misunderstanding, and we intend to Heave it." Her voice gained steel again. "But first, we need to hear from the homeowner responsible." All eyes turned to me. The room fell into a silence so thick it almost hummed. I stood, slow, deliberate. The chair legs scraped against the tile like a warning bell. "Yes," I said. The word came out low but clear. "The road is private." I held up the deed, my name in blue ink, the legal lines that gave me the ground beneath their tires. A murmur swept through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Can he do that?" Someone else said, "That's impossible." The president's jaw tightened. "This is a community road," she said. Her voice cut the air. "This belongs to everyone." I shook my head. The county records say otherwise. I stepped closer. The developer never transferred ownership to the HOA. The city never claimed it. It was left floating. And now, it's mine. Her fingers tightened on the clipboard, her knuckles pale. "You can't block residents," she said. Her voice wavered just enough to betray the crack. "Emergency vehicles, delivery trucks, visitors." "I haven't blocked anyone," I said. "The sign only states the truth. Access by permission. So far, everyone has my permission." I let the words hang, because silence after truth is more powerful than any speech. The vice president leaned forward, his face pale. "Why? Why would you do this?" I looked at him, then at the others, their faces a mix of fear and awe. "Because you tried to take what was mine, my gate, my choice. You wanted control, now I have it." A woman in the back gasped. Someone whispered, "Karma." The room buzzed like an angry hive. The president slammed her clipboard on the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. "You cannot hold the neighborhood hostage." I stepped closer until we were eye to eye. "I'm not holding anyone hostage, I'm reminding you. Power is not in the binder. It's in the ground beneath your feet. You forgot to claim it. I didn't." Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes lost their glass. For a moment she looked human, tired, small. Silence spread again. It felt like the first cool breeze after a heavy summer. People shifted in their seats. Not in fear now, but in thought. An elderly man stood slowly. His hands trembled, but his voice was firm. "Maybe we have been too strict. Maybe we forgot we are neighbors first." Heads turned, eyes softened. The president looked at him, then at me. Her lips pressed tight. No words came. I took a step back. I let the silence breathe, because silence was my best ally. It made every heart in the room hear its own beat. It made every mind ask its own question. Finally I said, "My gate stays closed, my road stays mine, but my door is open. If you want to talk neighbor to neighbor, not ruler to subject, I'm here." I set the deed on the table, not as a weapon, as a fact. Then I turned and walked out. Outside, the night air felt different, cooler, freer. The moon lit the sign at the entrance, private road, Access by permission only. The letters gleamed like a quiet victory. As I walked home, I thought of the faces inside, the cracks in their certainty, the small spark of humility in their eyes. I reached my porch. The dog wagged his tail once. The gate clicked shut behind me with a soft final sound. The night after the meeting felt heavy, not with fear, but with something slower, something that moved like deep water under the street. I sat on the porch long after the last car door slammed. The clubhouse lights went dark one by one. The moon slid behind a thin veil of cloud. The road stretched out in front of me, quiet, waiting. The sign at the entrance caught what little moonlight there was. Private road, access by permission only. Its black letters looked almost silver now. And for the first time since I planted it, I wondered if the silence was over, or if the real noise was about to begin. Morning came like a whisper of rain on dry soil. The dog nudged my hand before dawn. The air smelled of damp earth and something electric, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. When I stepped outside, I found the first sign of what the HOA had decided. A single sheet of paper taped to my gate, bold black letters at the top. Notice of community action. It was not signed by a name, just HOA board. I peeled it off slowly. The tape tore with a sound like ripping cloth. The words below were sharper than any blade. We will be seeking legal counsel. Your actions threaten the harmony and safety of our community. Immediate removal of the sign is expected before further steps are taken. I read it twice, 3 times. Each word meant to intimidate. Each line meant to pull me back under their rules. I folded the paper without a word. I placed it on the porch railing. Then I poured coffee. Because power that rattles only grows louder when you feed it attention. By noon the street began to hum again. Neighbors moved like shadows. No one waved, but eyes followed me, behind curtains, through half-open garage doors. The smell of fresh-cut grass floated across the yards, but it carried no peace, only a restless pulse. Around midday, a delivery truck stopped near the entrance. The driver stepped out and frowned at the sign. He hesitated, looked toward my house. I raised a hand. "It's okay," I called. "You can come in." He nodded and drove on. But even from a distance, I saw his eyes linger on the black letters. Private road, the words that turned an ordinary street into a story people would tell. Later the mail carrier approached, a woman who had worked this route for years. She stopped her cart and tilted her head toward the sign. "Big change, huh?" she said. Her voice carried curiosity, not fear. I smiled. "Sometimes change is overdue." She gave a small laugh. "About time someone reminded them rules cut both ways." Then she pushed her cart and moved on. Her whistle floated behind her like a quiet song of approval. By late afternoon, a knock came, not sharp, not timid, just steady. I opened the door and found the elderly man who had spoken in the meeting, his cap in his hands, his eyes kind. "Daniel, may I talk?" he said. I led him to the porch. We sat side by side while the dog curled at our feet. He looked at the road, at the sign, at the sky beginning to turn gold. "I've lived here 30 years, he said. "I've seen 4 presidents of the HOA. Everyone starts gentle, then the rules grow teeth." He sighed. "Your sign. It shook something in them, but it woke something in us too." I stayed quiet, he went on. "For too long we followed every new line in that binder, mailbox height, fence color, grass length. We forgot we are neighbors, not subjects." He turned to me. "I don't know what the board will try next, but I know you reminded us of something simple. Power belongs to those who claim it, not those who write it down." His voice carried no anger, only a weary kind of pride. He patted my shoulder, then stood. "Whatever happens, you made us think. That matters." I watched him walk away, his steps slow but sure. A man who had seen enough storms to know which ones pass and which ones change the land. When the sun dropped, the clubhouse lights blinked on again. But tonight there was no meeting. No cars lined the curb, only the quiet glow of windows like eyes that would not sleep. I sat on the porch until the stars came out, the dogs breathing a slow rhythm beside me. I thought of the letter taped to my gate. Legal counsel, harmony and safety. Words chosen to scare. But fear only works when you believe the person holding the stick. I remembered the man's words. Power belongs to those who claim it, not those who write it down. A breeze picked up. It carried the smell of rain from somewhere far. The sign swayed slightly but held firm, its silhouette sharp against the night. Then I heard it. A low rumble at the far end of the street. Headlights flared. A car crawled toward the sign. It stopped. The engine idled. I could not see the driver. The lights cut across the letters. Private road, access by permission only. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the car backed away, slow, silent, like a shadow retreating from a stronger dark. The night deepened. I leaned back in my chair. The quiet felt earned, not given. When I finally closed the door behind me, I caught one last glimpse of the sign through the window. It looked almost alive, not as a threat, not as a warning, but as a simple truth carved into the air. The storm did not come with thunder. It came with footsteps on wet pavement before sunrise. I woke to the sound, not loud, but certain. A rhythm of shoes on the street, slow, measured. The dog lifted his head and growled low. I held his collar and listened. Through the window I saw them. 3 figures in dark coats, umbrellas closed even though a fine mist touched the air. They moved like they owned the night, straight toward the sign. The first one bent low, a flashlight beam cut through the fog. The second held a clipboard. The third stood still, watching the houses, watching mine. I slipped on my boots and stepped outside. The air smelled of wet earth and cold metal. The mist kissed my face like a warning. The dog trotted beside me, his ears sharp. The figures straightened when they heard the gate creak. The flashlight swung toward me. Its light caught the black letters of the sign. Private road, access by permission only. The words glowed white in the beam. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice calm, steady. The man with the flashlight lowered it slightly. "We're with the HOA Legal Committee," he said. His tone was firm but not loud. "We're here to inspect this SIG." The woman with the clipboard stepped forward, her eyes narrow. "According to our council, this sign constitutes a violation of community trust and creates liability." She looked at me like she expected fear. I gave her none. "The sign marks my property," I said. "It informs visitors of the legal status of the road. It is a courtesy." The third figure finally spoke, a deep voice hidden behind a scarf. "Courtesy or threat, that depends on how people read it." I held his stare. "That's not my problem. It is their road only by habit. Habit is not ownership." They exchanged glances. The woman scribbled something on her clipboard. Her pen scratched like a blade against wood. The man with the flashlight turned back to the sign. He touched the post, testing its strength. The scarfed man stepped closer, his eyes dark. "Daniel, we could pursue an injunction. We could take this to court. Are you ready for that fight?" The dog growled again, low, steady. I rested a hand on his back. "Are you?" I said. For a moment only the mist moved between us. The scarfed man's eyes narrowed. Then he stepped back. The flashlight clicked off. The woman closed her clipboard with a sharp snap. "This isn't over," she said. Her voice tried to hold steel, but it wavered like glass in a strong wind. They turned as one and walked back down the road, their dark coats melting into the gray morning. Their footsteps faded. The dog watched until the last sound was gone. I stood by the sign, ran my hand over the damp wood, the letters cold and slick under my palm. Private road, access by permission only. It stood firm, unshaken. The sun rose slow behind the mist, painting the street in pale gold. Neighbors peeked through curtains, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. They had seen the early visitors. They had heard the quiet confrontation. By mid-morning, whispers spread like smoke, phones buzzed, garage doors opened and closed without reason. People looked at me with something new in their faces, not just curiosity, something closer to respect, or maybe fear. Mrs. Lang came across the street with a tray of muffins. Her hands trembled slightly. "Thought you might like these," she said, her voice soft, her eyes flicking toward the sign. "They came early this morning, didn't they?" I nodded. "They did." She swallowed. Are you worried?" I shook my head. "Not anymore." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. A real smile, not the thin, polite one. "Good," she said. "Someone needed to remind them. This isn't their kingdom." She left the muffins and went back to her house. Her steps lighter than when she arrived. The day passed with small changes. Neighbors who once avoided my eyes now offered quiet nods. A man who had never spoken to me before raised his hand in a slow salute. Even the mail carrier gave me a grin as she slid letters into my box. The street felt different. Not louder, not wilder, but free in a way I had never felt. Late in the afternoon, the black SUV returned. It rolled slow past the sign, stopped for a heartbeat, then drove on without a sound. No window lowered this time, no nod, just a presence. A reminder that not everyone liked the shift in power. As dusk settled, the president herself appeared at the end of my driveway. No clipboard, no folder. Her hands empty, her eyes softer than I had ever seen. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "May I speak with you?" I nodded and opened the gate. She stepped inside like someone entering a church. Her shoes made no sound on the gravel. "I came this morning," she began. "I wanted to tell you I am tired. Tired of fighting, tired of pretending the binder is more than paper. You proved something, not just to me, to everyone." Her eye has glistened, not with anger, with something close to regret. "I don't know if we can change the HOA overnight," she said, "but you've shown us. We forgot what it means to be neighbors." For the first time I saw not a president, not a ruler, but a neighbor, a woman who had carried the weight of control until it bent her. "I don't want war," I said. "I just want choice. Respect goes both ways." She nodded slowly. Her shoulders sagged. "I understand now." We stood in silence as the first stars appeared. The dog lay at our feet. The road behind her shimmered under the streetlight. It no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a shared space waiting for a new story. She finally looked at the sign. "I can live with this," she said, "if it means we all remember what matters." She turned and walked away, her steps slow, measured. Not the sharp clicks of command, but the quiet pace of someone letting go. I watched her until she disappeared into the dusk. Then I looked at the sign once more. It stood firm. Not as a weapon now, but as a lesson carved in wood. The night grew deep, the stars brightened, the dog rested his head on my foot. And for the first time since the first letter, the street truly felt like home. The road lay silver under the morning sun. Dew clung to the asphalt like tiny mirrors. The sign at the entrance caught the light and flared for an instant. "Private road, access by permission only." Its black letters burned bright as if to remind everyone that nothing would ever be the same. I stepped outside with my coffee. The dog padded beside me. His tail wagged slow. Not a bark, not a growl. Just the quiet confidence of a guard who knows his post is safe. The air felt different now, looser, like a knot finally untied. Neighbors moved through the morning with softer steps. Sprinklers whispered. Children's laughter floated across the street like it belonged again for the Fies. First time in months I did not feel eyes hiding behind blinds. I saw them instead. Faces at windows, smiles that reached past the glass. A simple wave from Mrs. Lang as she watered her roses. The old man tipping his cap while he fetched his paper. Even the vice president, jogging without sweat, raised a hand in quiet truce. I sat on my porch and watched the street breathe. The same street that once felt like a cage. Now it felt like open sky. The gate behind me stayed closed, not out of spite, but because it was my choice. Every creak of its hinges was mine to decide. That small freedom meant more than any victory. A soft knock came at mid-morning. I opened the door to find the president standing there. No clipboard, no binder, just her hands folded in front of her like she had left her old armor behind. "Daniel," she said, her voice steady but gentle. "May I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. She entered like someone walking into a memory. Her eyes scanned the room, not judging, just noticing. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Not for the sign, not for the deed, for reminding us of something we forgot." "I waited," she continued. "We built the HOA to keep the neighborhood beautiful, but somewhere along the way we started thinking beauty came from control. You reminded us it comes from choice, from people caring because they want to, not because they fear a fine." Her words carried no defense, only a quiet truth. I felt the weight of months lift just a little more. "I never wanted a fight," I said. "I only wanted space to live without someone measuring my every move." She smiled, a real smile this time, soft around the edges. "Maybe we needed you to fight back, to see what we had become." The dog wandered over and pressed his head against her leg. She bent to scratch behind his ears. He leaned into her hand like he had been waiting for this. She laughed quietly. The sound carried no tension, only release. We sat on the porch for a while. The sun climbed higher, a breeze rolled down the street. It carried the scent of cut grass and morning coffee. For once, there was no hidden agenda in the air. The old man from the meeting strolled by. He raised his cap. "Good day to you both," he said, his smile wide and easy. The president waved back. I did too. It felt like the street was learning how to be a neighborhood again. The vice president jogged past, still no sweat, but this time he slowed. "Morning," he said, his voice softer than before. No challenge, no calculation, just a greeting. He nodded to the president, to me, then jogged on. I leaned back in my chair, the wood warm from the sun. For the first time, I allowed myself to think beyond the fight, to imagine what might grow from this quiet victory. The president turned to me. "We'll still have rules," she said, "but maybe fewer, maybe gentler, maybe written with open hands instead of closed fists." I sipped my coffee and let her words settle. "That's all any of us need," I said. "Rules we agree to, not rules we hide behind." She nodded. "Will you help us rewrite them?" I looked at her, at the street, at the sign that started it all, the letters still bold. But now they felt less like a warning, more like a promise. "Yes," I said, "I'll help, as long as every rule begins with respect." She extended her hand. I took it, her grip firm, not of someone claiming power, but of someone sharing it. When she left, I stayed on the porch, the dog curled at my feet. I watched the neighborhood move like a single slow heartbeat. Children raced chalk bikes across the pavement. Parents chatted by mailboxes. The road that was once a battlefield now felt like common ground. The sign remained. I had thought of taking it down, but now it seemed right to keep it, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a story. A reminder of the day we all learned that freedom is not given, it is claimed. As evening fell, the sky turned the color of amber glass. Streetlights flickered on. The dog gave a contented sigh. I closed the gate softly. The click echoed like the closing of a chapter. I breathed in the cool night air. The street was quiet, not the silence of fear, the silence of peace.